Uh, Today, I wanted to talk about distraction and about focus. And this is a really important topic. And I think it's one that many people deal with in one way or another. Um, and certainly, the sentiment that I hear from people is that we live in a distracted world, or, unless you're living out in the woods, we live in a world that is, constantly begging for our attention in different ways, and especially the digital world. Um, and between email and text messages and social media, um, there are so many things calling our attention every moment throughout the day, and even when we're sleeping. Um, so I wanted to talk about a few things and look at some ways that you can deal with that. I know for myself that if I don't set things up um, to support my focus, I will generally be distracted, right? Especially if I'm sitting at my computer. Um, there are just so many things to look at. So many things that are calling my attention, and so many things that I want to look at as well. Um, so I'll go through a couple points that hopefully will be useful. The first one is to think about ways to really set yourself up for focus, or set yourself up to not be distracted. And I'm sure you heard the story of Odysseus, and you know, Odysseus was going to be sailing by the sirens, and the thing with the sirens was that if you heard their song, you would go mad, and you would jump into the water and crash on the rocks, and to your peril. And Odysseus had this crazy idea that he wanted to be able to hear the siren song without jumping. So he had his crew tie him to the mast, and then he had all of his crew plug their ears and sail through the area. And Odysseus then was able to hear the sirens and not jump overboard and kill himself. Now, I think this is a really interesting story, because I think it speaks to what we experience moment to moment throughout our days. You could be working on something, and somebody texts you, or um, you get a notification of an email, or there's a great video that you want to watch on YouTube, and all these things are the siren song kind of pulling us. And so I think if you do want to focus, it can be really practical, so to speak, to tie yourself to the mast. And I would go one step beyond that, which is, um, why sail through the siren's water? Um, if you can set up an area uh, in your work environment that is somewhat distraction free, that can be really powerful for the times when you do want to focus. Um, so that can be done in a couple of ways. Certainly turning off all notifications, closing browsers, and just having what you want to work on there is a powerful way to do that. I know on my computer you can have multiple desktops, so I have one desktop that's empty, so that if I really want to focus on something, I go to that desktop and I can open a document and be undistracted there. I also find it useful because I am easily distracted. I find it really useful to have different work environments. I sort of have my standard area where I can work, and I can do work that doesn't quite require the same level of focus. And then it's fine to have some of those distractions. But I also have another area that's a quieter space, more of a meditative space, and that's where I do most of my more contemplative work, creative work, planning work. And that brings me to my second point, which is it can be really useful to separate the part of yourself that does planning and delegating of tasks from the part of you that executes. And I want to give credit to David Allen, who wrote the book Getting Things Done, because he does a nice job of talking about this. There's the you that is really good at planning and breaking things down and creating bite-sized executable steps, and then there's the part of you that just likes to crank widgets. And I like to do my planning away from my main computer, where I can be really undistracted, because for me it's a very different quality of thinking. And then once I have my to-do list well organized, then I can go to my regular desk and crank out some to-dos there. And these are more, kind of busy work, that stuff that just has to get done. If it was writing a paper or something like that, again, I would tend to do that in a quieter space that's separate from all distraction. So separating that, your planner from your executor, the you that just cranks widgets, can be really, really powerful. Another thing that you can do is, it's a funny thing that very often people are less distracted when they're doing something that they enjoy. Not always, but very often, if we're engaged in a book that we like, or a movie or a TV show, or an engaging conversation, we're focused because we want to be focused. And I think that's a really key thing to notice is, what's your level of motivation for the thing that you're working on? And the more you can, at least, you may not enjoy the task, but the more you can appreciate what that task is going to achieve for you, that can increase your motivation and certainly will help your focus. And especially sorting out, something I've talked about a bit in some other videos, sorting out any incongruity that you have about doing something. The more congruent you are about getting something done, the easier it is to focus. Another point is, when you want to be focused, like we do in many of the guided sessions, give yourself a moment to calm your nervous system down. If you allow yourself to really downshift and settle down, I think you'll find that your ability to focus, it goes up dramatically. And in fact, if you really calm your nervous system down, you can notice distractions and you won't necessarily get pulled by them. So, maybe an email notification will come in and you notice it peripherally, but you're not going to let yourself get pulled or lost in that distraction. And so that can be very, very useful. Just learning, if you notice yourself being distracted, pause for a moment, calm yourself down, take a pause, take a couple deep breaths, and then see how that can help you focus. And the last thing actually it's two more things. A really powerful technique is what's called the Pomodoro Technique. And if you look online, there's tons of articles. I'll see if I can link something in the notes. And basically, the Pomodoro Technique just is one where you do time boxing. Like you say, okay, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to work on this writing project. And you put on your timer. And for 10 minutes, you do not allow any other distractions. And what I really like about this technique is it's a great way to begin to train your focus. I think a lot of times we may be shooting for too much. Like, why can't I focus for 3 hours? Well, maybe your attention hasn't been trained to that level yet. But if you start with these Pomodoros, you train your brain to focus when you're asking to, which is fantastic. And then when the 10 minutes is over, take a break And then you can do multiple Pomodoros. And by the way, it's called the Pomodoro because the guy who came up with this had a kitchen timer that looked like a tomato. And the last piece, I'll probably do another video on this, but is really to begin to contrast what's going on internally for you when you're exceptionally focused and when you're exceptionally distracted. And I've done some videos on taking an inventory of an emotion, and I would recommend going back and forth between a few great examples of where you were really focused, you know, just uncompromising, like an easy focused attention, and then times when you were completely distracted and incapable of focusing. And if you do that, you start to train your body to notice the signals of both and to begin to practice going back and forth so that when you do want to focus, you know how to do that with your attention. You know, it reminds me that, you know, when we were little kids, at least when I was a kid, very often I'd hear the teacher say, "Hey, pay attention." And but they didn't always tell you how. And this is part of the how of your attention, is taking that inventory of what is going on in your neurology when you're focused. How do you sit? How are you feeling? What's your breathing like? All the things that we do on a regular basis. What are you picturing when you're focused? What are you hearing? What things do you say to yourself when you're incredibly focused? You know, we all have moments where we achieve that, where we have to get something done and we're very connected to the activity and you don't even notice distractions. You know, it's amazing that at times you can get so focused that you may not notice things going on around you, or you're so focused that time flies. And this reminds me of, you know, that video where people are playing basketball and you're tasked with counting the number of passes of the basketball. And what most people don't notice in watching that video is that there's a guy in a bear costume dancing by. And the reason they don't notice that very obvious distraction is because they're focused on a specific task or activity. And our brains love that when we give them something very specific to focus on. So I hope these are useful, and I'll definitely be doing a couple more talks on distraction and focus. Yeah, and I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks.